In this video, I want to talk about the inner game of effortless performance. I like to think about this as the inner method of performing that has slowly emerged over the past year as I have crossed the threshold into musical performance and getting comfortable on stage. This is something that used to be a huge challenge for me, and it was something I was crippled with really for my whole life. I started playing piano as a kid and going to recitals and things like that. It was just an absolutely miserable experience. I had some experiences performing in college, and throughout my adult life I've had opportunities to perform, and they've just been absolutely miserable. And as soon as I would get on stage, I mean, even in the days or even weeks leading up to a performance, my brain would just be completely scrambled. My fingers wouldn't work right. I couldn't remember the lyrics to my own songs, and could hardly remember my own name half the time. So it's really an incapacitating experience for people who have a great deal of performance anxiety. I think it's something that folks who have a kind of a smaller dose of performance anxiety don't quite realize. It's like, well, you just, reframe it as excitement and all is well. It's like, well, that's great, that works for you. But for me, that did not work. So it's been a process of figuring out what works, what doesn't work. And these three techniques that I'm going to share with you today are really fundamental to what supports me as I step on stage. And one of the things that I've learned as I have been communicating about this process with other performers is that my own way of experiencing this is not always identical to how other people experience it. And so I put together a quiz called the Performance Archetype Quiz that is based on the Big Five personality traits and the Myers-Briggs personality framework. So if you want to see what archetype profile you are as a performer, to give you some clarity around specific things that you might lean on to address the challenges that you're facing, you can find the link to that quiz in the notes below. So for most of us, regardless of your archetype, this is especially true for the introverted archetypes though, one of the main issues behind why we experience so much distress around performance is that our identities have become intertwined with our performance. And this triggers a powerful response in us because our identity is tied into belonging. And this taps into a very deep, primal, ancestral belonging mechanism, which for us human beings is identical to survival. There's no difference in our ancient ancestors' times between belonging to the tribe, being included in the tribe, being accepted by the tribe, and surviving. If somebody was excluded from their group, they were sure to meet an unfortunate end. So these activations that are happening deep inside our neurobiology are happening deep inside our mammalian brain. They're activating a survival mechanism that really doesn't have anything to do with the actual situation that we're experiencing. So a really good way to think about this is through the lens of a rider and an elephant. This is oftentimes used to describe the relationship between the human layer of the brain, which is like the cortex. It's a thin layer of brain matter that is coding the much larger part of the brain, which is the mammalian brain, which also includes the lizard brain. So it's as if we are riding an elephant and approaching life's challenges, in this case, performance, and we are facing both the rational, logical reasoning of the rider that wants to do a particular thing, and the reactivity that's happening, which is very much nonverbal. Elephants don't speak English, they don't speak any language for that matter. and they are feeling and sensing on a level that the rider isn't really tuned into. So the rider is thinking and knowing and assessing and judging and planning and all of these kinds of things, whereas the elephant is living in a place of sensitivity and feeling and intuition. And if the elephant isn't feeling it, if the elephant is having some kind of a fear reaction where it feels like its survival is on the line, then guess who is going to win? The elephant is going to decide whether or not you're going to take path A, which is what you're wanting to take, getting on stage and doing the performance, or path B, which is hightailing it out of there. So you can imagine an elephant and a rider approaching a riverbank. And it's a crossing place. You can see a lot of other elephants and riders on the other side of the riverbank. And you're negotiating with the elephant to try to coax it through the river. You're trying to, this is obviously a metaphor for doing something like getting up on stage. And so there's this dynamic between how we are relating to ourselves and how we are reacting to the situation. So this internal relationship is really important, this relationship between the rider and the elephant. So because our identity has become so entangled in this idea of what it means to get on stage, the prospect of crossing the river feels so much bigger than it actually is. The rapids seem bigger, it seems like it's a much wider river and much deeper, and the current is much stronger. It seems like it's a much larger thing than it actually is. So in the situation facing this river, it's really important that the rider and the elephant have a really good rapport, that they have a really good synergy between the two of them, where they can work as a team to navigate the crossing of that river. But what most of us face in that kind of a situation is a lot of tension and conflict between the two of them. There's some kind of internal reactivity, and the rider is like frustrated, like, why the hell are you responding like this? I remember hearing my own self-talk in the early days with this kind of stuff, and I would hear myself saying, like, what is wrong with you? Like, these are the kinds of words that I would say to myself. The rider speaking to the elephant. What is wrong with you? How come you can't just do this thing? It's not that big of a deal. These are just your friends, you know? Nobody's going to judge you. This is the rider using language and rationality, scolding the elephant and telling the elephant, like, you shouldn't be reacting like this. And the elephant, in turn, because of this disconnection, doesn't trust that the rider is actually going to be able to steer it in a direction that is going to be safe. It doesn't feel like there's any reason it should trust the rider. So the rider doesn't trust the elephant doesn't trust the rider. There's a tremendous amount of internal conflict, which manifests as a lot of internal tension. And when you're facing something like this entanglement of identity with performance, this makes the crossing of the river seem even bigger than it actually is. The rapids seem more dangerous, the river seems wider, it seems deeper, the current seems stronger. Everything about this, the prospect of getting on stage, aka crossing this river, seems so much larger than it actually is. So to be able to conquer that effectively, the rider and the elephant have to be functioning as a unit. So that's the first order of business. How do you go about reestablishing trust between the rider and the elephant? So before we get into this three-pronged approach to tackle that problem, it's important that we have clarity around what our goals are, because it's easy for us to just have this kind of amorphous sense of getting up there and performing. But we need to be a little bit more specific, I think. So there are three goals, as far as I'm concerned, with respect to a good performance, an effortless performance, a powerful performance. The first goal is what I like to think of as core presence. So it's not really about technical proficiency as much as it is about a steady presence. So our responsibility as a performer is almost in a sense, to bring a kind of light up on stage and to maintain that light for the duration of the performance. So there's a steadiness component to it, there's a presence component to it that is, in my view, so much more important than the technical proficiency of the performer. Technical proficiency obviously is important, but it is not the most important thing. I am much more captivated by and impressed by and moved by a performer that has a grounded presence and that is moving and expressing from that presence and has maybe not the best skill set in terms of their technical abilities. I would much rather see that performance than a performance of somebody who is a virtuoso but lacks any real, juice, in terms of their presence on stage. So steady core presence is key, and this is something that's oftentimes taken offline before we even get on stage when we're dealing with a lot of anxiety. So that's the first goal, is to have an established core presence that can be maintained. The second goal is confidence, and confidence is very related to presence, but confidence has more to do with how we engage in what we say, how we engage in our movements, how we stand, how we present ourselves, how we play. There is a confidence that we bring into our presentation. So these are kind of two sides of the same coin, presence and confidence. Confidence is really the expression of presence in action. And the third goal, and by far the most important goal, is enjoyment. You don't want to see somebody up on stage who's really not having a good time. Enjoyment is something that is contagious, it's something that is captivating, and it's something that not only puts the audience at ease, but it gives you ultimately what it is that you're looking for with performance. It's not to have people think you're amazing, it's to really enjoy the process of sharing your music with somebody. And so that's really what it's all about. This is something that I knew early on when I was struggling with performance anxiety. I knew that I didn't want to be the best performer. That wasn't my goal. My goal was to enjoy the experience of being on stage in the same way that I saw other performers enjoying their experience. It was very easy, whether it was a house show or a small intimate venue, seeing performers who would get up on stage who were able to find the same kind of enjoyment in their music in a performance setting as I was able to find in a private, in a private setting. They were able to find that same love of the music and bring that into a performance environment, have an accentuated experience of enjoyment because they're sharing the enjoyment with other people. That's what I wanted. And so that, I think, is really important to have as a goal. This is about being able to get up there confidently, being able to not collapse, to not shut down, and to be able to enjoy the experience. So now that we've clarified our destination, we've clarified what our goal is, returning now to this impasse, being at the edge of the river and feeling this resistance, feeling this reactivity, feeling the revolt of the elephant and the reaction of the rider to the elephant, this dynamic, this tug of war between what we want and the reactions inside of us that are trying to tell us to run to the hills. How do we address this problem? So the inner game, the inner method of effortless performance begins and ends with self-acceptance. So we're talking about radical self-acceptance here. We're talking about delusional self-acceptance. We're talking about the kind of unconditional acceptance that a parent has for a young child. The kind of feeling when a parent sees a child performing at a play, for example, where there's just so much love and acceptance of the child that they can do no wrong. They're 100% enveloped in a field of love and acceptance no matter what. There are some specific practices that we can get into elsewhere to get into a little bit more detail. But in general, this attitude is really the magic sauce in terms of transforming your relationship to performance, because you're really transforming your relationship to yourself. Instead of facing the reactivity that you feel inside with this attitude of what the hell is wrong with you, you instead greet it with a sensitivity, with a presence. So this is building that core presence, a presence that is completely accepting of whatever the reactivity is. So you can think about this in terms of the rider and the elephant. You can think about it in terms of reparenting, which is a term that comes from the world of psychology and Jungian psychoanalysis, where you essentially are taking on the role of a parent to yourself. So if you're feeling this fear and reactivity, you adopt the same kind of attitude in relation to yourself as you would a parent relating to their child. And you, as silly as it sounds, you can talk to yourself and say, "Hey, it's okay. It's all right. What's going on here?" So it's really important that the elephant, because remember, the elephant doesn't really speak English. The elephant is just going to feel that attitude. So these are deep, unconscious, implicit dimensions of your psychobiology. Most of our psychology is operating in the shadows. Only a small amount of it is conscious in the rider. So we have to be mindful of that. And so we have to create an environment where the elephant actually feels in those unconscious places like it's okay. Like it's, there's somebody that is tuned into what's going on here and isn't fighting with me, isn't forcing me, isn't making me do anything that I don't want to do. Right? And so the key here is to become an elephant whisperer rather than somebody who is forcing the elephant under threat or whatever else to cross the river. It's not going to do the internal relationship any good to just force yourself to do the thing. There is a place to push yourself into the deep end. I'm not saying that you should shy away from facing the fear. What I'm saying is that there's a way to face the fear and there's a way not to face the fear. The way to face the fear is as a team internally, where the rider and the elephant are on board, where you have earned the trust of the elephant. So when you say, okay, we're going to cross this river now, the elephant is like, all right, I don't feel great about this, but okay, here we go. That's the key. It's you're not beating the elephant into submission and whipping it and putting your spurs on. You're learning how to be attuned and sensitive, because ultimately the gift that you have as a musician is something that is going to be drawn forth from within the elephant. It's that attunement and that sensitivity and that groundedness and the feeling, which is the realm of the elephant, that you ultimately want to bring into your performance. And so it's always going to be choked out. It's always going to be constrained. It's always going to be not what you would want it to be if you are operating by way of force when it comes to getting on stage. Okay, so the second prong of the inner method is what I call the inner tribe. So this is the development through visualization of an inner tribe of mentors, in a sense, of other performers or other people who have made an impression on you in some way that really goes deep. And we're leveraging our capacity to visualize to bring this relationship into our experience as if it were actually happening in the moment. So I was really clued into this as being a powerful method by a couple of different things. The first was actually being with certain people in a performance situation and realizing how different I felt when I wasn't alone. When I actually had somebody there that I was doing it with, most of us artist types are pretty sensitive. And so being tuned into this other person in this particular situation really transformed my overall experience of the performance. And so it was kind of an aha moment. It's like, okay, well, it's basically the same situation. I'm still getting up in front of people, but there's something about me being attuned to this person where it's kind of carrying me in a way that is making me feel less reactive about this. So then, just recognizing and knowing about the power of visualization, I started playing around with this and realized that you've probably heard this before, the brain, the mind doesn't really know the difference between reality and visualization. If you get good at visualization, you can trick yourself into, in terms of your deep psyche, in terms of the elephant, into actually thinking that this is real. So I have in my own inner arena a handful of individuals who have deeply impressed themselves on me that I use as a kind of touchstone. And I do this in the practice room, and I also do this in performance, especially going into a performance, where I bring to mind the visual of that moment of connection with this person. And these are not necessarily people actually, all of the people in my inner tribe that I'm working with at the moment are not people that I've met in real life. So these are people that I've seen in YouTube videos, and I'll share a couple of them with you here very shortly. And I see how they are really living into these three goals that we've identified. They have a very steady core presence. It's very easy to see them and connect with them. They have a comfortability and an ease about them. They're very confident in a very quiet way. And they're enjoying the experience. They're just saturated by the music. And I'm so touched by their performance that I kind of encapsulate that as an inner entity that then I can access. And I don't know if you're familiar with the idea of mirror neurons, but this taps into some of the research and work done by a guy named Stephen Porges. He developed something called the polyvagal theory. I won't go super into nerdy language around neuroscience, but one of the really powerful things from the polyvagal theory is the role of the social engagement system, which is what he calls it. And it's basically the parasympathetic nervous system, so the rest and digest, the calm, relaxed, everything's okay aspect of the nervous system, and its relationship to social engagement. So what we're really doing is we're using visualization to activate our social engagement system so that we can root ourselves in the parasympathetic rest digest mode. It gives our mind something to focus on. It gives us a palpable sense that we're not alone, that we're here with this other person. And it provides a touchstone to remind us of the kind of tone and frequency and feel of what it's like to be present and confident and in a state of enjoyment. So I'm going to play with you my most common go-to for one of my inner tribes persons. This is Sarah Barry Ellis performing with the Milk Carton Kids. And I'll just play you a clip of this performance, and then we can talk about it afterwards. I do just want to watch a little bit of it. I don't need to. Okay, so Sarah Barry Ellis, I think, one of the most underrated vocalists of our time. There's something about that performance when I watched it the first time, when I watched it the second time, when I watched it the 20th time, it just penetrated into my soul. And there's something, I don't sing like her, I don't sound like her, I don't have the same kind of style as her in any way whatsoever. But there's something about the essence of who she is in that performance that is what I want to bring. It's something that resonates very deeply with me. And so when I am getting ready for a performance, when I'm practicing, you can play around with this kind of thing in the practice room. I will bring to mind that the image of the video that you just watched. It's just immediately accessible to me. And I tune into that, and I tune into her, and I can feel and hear the tone and the sound of her voice and the visual of her presence on stage. And it has an immediate and profound effect on my own inner kind of composition. So this is a touchstone that is very powerful, leveraging, as I mentioned, visualization to essentially kind of, hack into the social engagement system and the parasympathetic nervous system to give the elephant a sense that, hey, we're okay. We've got people here who know what they're doing. Hey, it's like this. All you got to do is be like this. There's that resonance. There's that the touchstone into what the goal is. That felt sense understanding of what the goal is, and it just provides this very subtle but powerful anchor point when it comes to getting up on stage. So I'll share one more inner tribesman with you. This is a guy by the name of Mandel. I think I'm pronouncing that right, who was on The Voice and did a cover of Girl from the North Country. That's how I found him. I wanted to learn that song. And I oftentimes will look for people who have already done covers of a song and then cover their cover. And I found his cover. Then I found his performance of this on The Voice and was very tuned into him as I was listening to him. And then one of the things that really stood out to me in a really powerful way was his disposition as the chairs turned around. So I'm going to just play it for you, and then I'll provide some reflections on it on the other side. So pay attention to how he is before the chairs turn around and how he is after the chairs turn around. All right, so what was so deeply ingrained in my memory and my soul and watching that was this confidence and this non-reactivity, this resolve in Mandel in that moment where the turning of the chairs didn't change a thing for him. He was able to look at those judges who had turned around that in a way that was unshakable. It was that core presence and that confidence that were absolutely unmoved. It was just absolute, beautiful, perfect presence and confidence. And of course, you can hear what I'm calling enjoyment, the full experiencing of the music. He's in the song. He's in the music. He's feeling it. He's not squeezed out of the experience. He's not forcing it. He's not making it happen. He's allowing the music to happen. He's enjoying the process. So that's another one of my inner tribes people. And again, you can deliberately call these people in your inner tribe to mind as a touchstone. It's something to hold on to and bring you into a memory, a remembering of what it's like to be present and confident and in the flow, in the enjoyment of the experience. All right, so the third prong of the inner method of effortless performance is what I like to call Avatarification. And so this is basically the process of creating an avatar for yourself, of yourself. so that you are able to distance yourself a little bit. Remember, we talked about at the very beginning that part of the problem, a big part of the problem, is this over-identification with the performance. So this is a way, in addition to getting your reps in, I mean, ultimately, the only way to really disentangle your identity from the experience of performing is to just keep performing with mindfulness and reflection and that kind of thing. Eventually, it works itself out, but there's really no other way to do it other than actually doing it. But to provide an assist, avatarification of yourself allows you to kind of gamify the situation where you can kind of take a step back. You are taking a step back from the avatar, which is doing the performance. So this is something that Perlman, the great magician, talks about in his book, where he learned very early on as a performer that he would call himself Oz the performer. And Oz the performer was somebody different than who he was. And so if he was at a restaurant and he went up to a table of people to show them some magic tricks and they rebuffed him, it wasn't aimed at him. It was aimed at Oz the performer. And Oz the performer takes it in stride. So you create a kind of an avatar that you can then visualize doing the thing that you are wanting to do, which is performing. So you create a kind of distance and a caricature of the person who is actually doing the performer. My vocal coach also talks about this when he's talking to vocal performers who are having performance anxiety, is to develop a kind of a stage presence. Now, this may seem to go against the grain of authenticity, but in my experience, both with myself and with other people, it's actually the opposite. It gives you permission to be more authentic. So you're creating a kind of persona that you encapsulate and are able to manipulate in a way that is that allows you to separate yourself from the situation. Stephen Pressfield also talks about this in his book, The War of Art, which is a must-read, in my opinion, if you're interested in doing creative things, putting yourself out there creatively. He talks a lot about the resistance and overcoming the resistance. But he talks about a period in his career as a writer where he realized that he was essentially the CEO of a company that was doing writing work, but he, as the CEO of the company, would be calling publishing companies and setting dates and setting deadlines and all of these kinds of things as somebody who was kind of removed from the writer. He was not the writer when he was doing these things. He was the CEO of the company who was promoting the writer, but he, as the promoter, was not the writer. So he could promote with reckless abandon and without feeling like he was being egotistical, because he wasn't really promoting for himself. He was promoting for this guy over here who was the writer. So it allows you to speak in an abstract way and kind of see yourself in an abstract way that gives you some remove and gives you some freedom. I remember getting clued into this many years ago, and I heard a friend of mine who grew up doing a lot of sports, and we were talking about just life in general, and he referred to himself by his last name. He was like, "Come on, Boyd." His last name is Boyd. He said, "Come on, Boyd, you can do better than this." And so this is another example of creating, you kind of have this persona of yourself that you've named something like your last name, that you then can visualize moving around and doing the things that you want to do. So it's like, okay, I want Jansen in my case. So Jansen's going to do this. He's going to take the stage, and when he gets up, he's going to do that. Or, he's always able to find, we'll talk in later videos around other techniques that you can employ, especially right as you're getting on stage, where you can think about yourself in the third person. And you can say, well, I know that he always is able to do this when he gets in that situation. So you're creating a spacer between yourself and the avatar of yourself who is the performer. Now, I'll add as a bonus here one of the ways that really helps on so many levels, including this process of seeing yourself in the abstract as a performer rather than getting enmeshed with the act of performance, is going and seeing live performances, going to open mics, going to situations where you're seeing other people who are getting up on stage, because you begin to see other people getting on stage, and then as you objectify yourself as an avatar getting up on stage, you see it's really just the same thing. There's not really any difference between what they're doing and what you're doing. And so being able to see another person who is getting up on stage, and you see the other person feeling nervous, you see the other person making mistakes, you see the other person maybe forgetting lyrics or not being 100%, and then they come down off stage and you reflect on how you feel about them. So you talk to them afterwards and you realize that what you saw on stage has absolutely no bearing whatsoever on how you interact with them, particularly if they're open and connectable and authentic in both situations. If you feel like you can actually connect to them, you might actually feel more connected to them as a human being and have more respect for them as a human being because they had the courage to get up on stage and risk making mistakes that they ultimately made. And so you begin to see in other people this disconnection between who they are, how they're valued, how they're seen as a human being, the fact that they're still accepted, you're accepting them, you're not excluding them from the tribe. So the elephant in you is seeing that, hey, this elephant is actually, as much a part of the tribe, if not more, because they've demonstrated this, they've gotten up and shared their gift, and that was meaningful, and they've shown their willingness to get up and fail, which is also meaningful, and they're even more a part of the tribe as a result of it. So then it's a lot easier to flip that around and see yourself in that light. See yourself as somebody who is getting up to do this thing. Maybe you'll fail, maybe you won't. But either way, you had the courage to get up there and do it. And you create an opportunity to connect with people in the audience who are actually going to be more inclusive of you as a result of you having done it. So this is, there's so many other things to learn and pick up on and glean by going to open mics and going to other performances, seeing how other people do their thing and taking notes. There's so many things that you can get out of that experience, but this one ties directly into this practice of avatarification. All right, so that's it. I just want to end where we began with the principle of delusional self-acceptance. This is so important at every turn to find a way to envelop your experience with something that is an attitude of acceptance. Even if you find yourself beating yourself up, even if you find the rider whipping the elephant, don't beat the rider up. If you catch yourself in that kind of a habit, in that kind of dynamic, just relax into that experience. Acknowledge that you caught it. You're mindful of that process that you've captured, and accept it. It's like, okay, well, this is what I do. This is what I've been doing. But hey, let's not do this anymore. It's okay. It's not that big of a deal. And so you envelop that with this feeling of acceptance. And what you'll find eventually with these methods is slowly these patterns and these habits will start to melt away. Slowly the elephant and the rider will establish trust. That capacity for self-trust is natural. It's something that will happen. It's not something you have to make happen. It's something that you create conditions within which that natural strength of self-trust can develop. So, and then once you start to find it, you're going to be able to find even more confidence. You're going to be able to find even more interest in leaning into these kind of risky, seemingly risky environments, and you're going to feel pulled into taking on more and more higher risk kinds of performances. It's something that you kind of get addicted to. I hope this helps. I hope you found it to be useful. Again, if you're interested in getting a little bit more specificity into your own unique performance archetype, please check out the performance archetype quiz below. I'd be really curious to hear whether or not you feel this tracks with you. You can leave those comments below this video. And if you liked this video, you're definitely going to want to watch the next video, which is the outer method for effortless performance. You can check that video out right here. We'll see you there.